Let's talk about Well of Worlds by Colin McComb. This is an adventure anthology for Planescape. So I've done one standalone adventure in this kind of month of Planescape. The Eternal Boundary, often considered one of the best, if not the best, standalone adventure. There are four anthologies for Planescape, and I think they're probably the best Planescape adventures in terms of separate products. There's some good adventure outlines in some of the other products as well, but Well of Worlds is one. It was the first. There's also Tales from the Infinite Staircase. Is it Four Doors? The Four Doors, and Great Modron March, which is technically the prequel to the not very good, very overrated Dead Gods. Well of Worlds is the only non-themed one. The others are all themed around something. This is just a set in 9 adventures plus an odd appendix. It is internally illustrated chiefly by Tony Di Talizzi. It has a couple of, again, reprinted or reused in various products, full colours by people like Thingy Rakeland, what's his name? Sam Rakeland, Dana Knutson, Rob Ruppel. And the mapping is by Rob Lazzaretti, who's really the Planescape mapper, cartographer. Very good drawings of the planes and of particular planes as well, like the wheel as a whole and planes individually. It comes with a poster map, double-sided. One is of a map of Avernus, the top layer of Bartor, of the Nine Hells. The other side is a negative colour image of the Great Wheel that you get this in the core Planescape box with the adventure locations. This is for the 9 adventure locations for this. That's sort of redundant, kind of a waste of a side. It's not ugly or anything. You'd rather perhaps have, given that there are other layers of planes in this, it might have been nice to have that. But yeah, this is, I've used this in game. This is very good, to be fair. The Avernus map, nice map, with a number of things which, as you know, my players, having seen it and looked around, you know, because they arrive or go into this, but they arrive up on a mountain. They get to see a wide area. You know, they get to see a bunch of stuff. That's fun. But yeah, so you know, and then they got to pick where to go and whatever. So yeah, that's a useful map. The adventures, it's on. I think this is the. I'm not sure. This may not be the best of the anthologies. I'd have to do a reread and redecide. But it's certainly one of the most broadly useful, and it's interesting seeing like just how much is like how many good ideas there are, and how a lot of it is reasonably well executed. There are limitations, partly due to the form. The page count presses against second edition era authors because, like, the page count of 8 to 16 pages per adventure, where it doesn't for Gygax, but because the format is more expansive, it's 2-column in larger text, and also because there's a habit of overwriting random stuff and having more full page art, so the page count gets sucked up. There's a good range of adventures, there's a good level range. Some of them are adaptable. One specifically has a how to tier it for low level, mid level, high level. That's good. It's, that could be controversial, that could be seen as overly gamist rather than simulationist. But with anthology adventures and adventure seeds, what they're dropping, so they're already something which isn't organic to a particular campaign. It's not like you have to go and do this. This is what the campaign is. It is instead something you're looking for resources. And two, it doesn't work with all adventures, but with some where you can imagine there being different kinds of responses based on the problem, the better. In fact, maybe there are two. No, I think there's just the one that has active tiering. Others give recommendations about things. So yeah, you see a variety of the planes. The range is there is one in Bartor, one in the Mazes of Sigil. Several have bits in Sigil. One in Bartor, one in the Mazes of Sigil. 2 that spend at least some time in the Abyss. 1 is in Carceris. 1 is chiefly on the Prime. 2 are chiefly on the Prime, in fact, I think perhaps. 1, 2. Yeah, but I think 1 is partly on the Prime, 1 is chiefly on the Prime. Then there is one out on the Outlands in a gate town. There is one in the Beastlands and one technically in Arborea, but not really. It's a pretty insignificant access to both Beastlands and Arborea, because you go between them on the Oceanus. The appendix is magic items, which I'll very quickly sum up as not terribly useful. It has a couple of good reminders about rules. It has an interesting comment on, look, people who have any kind of resources in Sigil can make or get a potion of healing or a +1 dagger. That's not really the challenge. You can get a weapon. They're common, but getting better weapons is harder. And then it introduces, I base 7 or 6 weapons, more basically, and 3 other things, of which Shifter's Manacles, one of the miscellaneous magic, and one of the weapons to play in a Man-Catcher are also in Sigil, in the cage, Guide to Sigil. The items, which are chiefly either scythes or sickles of flame, light, pain, and paralyzation, respectively, are they're actually quite fun, with kind of weird effects, and usually both it's a plussed item and it has a secondary effect. The planar wards are a block to gating in and things like that, and a block to portals being accessed. Seeker Stones are a compass to find someone. They're useful. It is weird that there are 4 pages in an adventure anthology with magic items you don't need, and they're not revolutionary. It's not like they're really, a couple of them you could see as being really useful in a planar campaign, but those pages could have gone to adventures, so I don't love their presence. The intro is fine. The intro actually includes the parallel map, which I think is actually... yeah, which is, weirdly, it is not this black and whited. This is actually Lazaretti having drawn a black and white map. Well, not weirdly, it's probably positive. Black and white map in the style of the other maps inside the book. The art by Detail at Sea is pretty continual through it and usually adds to things. It's often scene setting. The first one, what I'll do now is I'll just go through give a couple of minutes to each, go through the 9 adventures. So you've got Bartor and Back, which is, starts... This is a trapdoor into the plains and sends you to Avernus, the top layer of Bartor. But you start by investigating a wizard's mound for a missing wizard or whatever it is. Yeah. What is there? Is there a particular? Someone says the wizards abandoned their home, so they go there. They go into the mound. It is a 9-room dungeon, fairly small and linear in one sense, just because there's no looping or anything through it, but it's insignificantly linear. It is fine, like having one small space where you investigate rooms. It means there's very few dynamic encounters. You can see the map there. There's very few dynamic encounters or odd things that happen in that kind of dungeon, but that's okay. It is fine. And as a first level adventure, because it's aimed at 46 PCs, levels all totaling 4 or more levels, PCs preferred, primes. Given the challenges that are presented, and I've run this adventure for first levels, it is basically a first level adventure. It's meant to start a Planescape campaign. It does it very well. Throughout, you can assume that the text is slightly overwritten. McComb is less guilty of this than some people, but he's not as efficient as well, say Rich Baker is pretty good for this, for instance. Usually things are about a sentence or 2 longer. There's always a habit of giving more explanation than needed about something and expanding, whilst often missing out mechanics. That's a habit, by the way, throughout most second edition products. Not all, by any means. But many. McComb is somewhere in the middle on this. He'll sometimes be quite good at giving you mechanics you need, and sometimes not tell you vital things. I'll pick up 1 or 2 examples of that. In the place, there's some rooms. There's some empty rooms. There's a room where, in the loose bricks of the fireplace, there's 3 vials of holy water and 2 potions of extra healing. This is actually not a bad micro-tutorial dungeon if you give the general advice, you're kind of Principia about this, to be like, look places, poke stuff. There's a green slime in the kitchen, and this is one thing. This isn't kidding around. And he doesn't say, "Oh, give players a way out in this adventure." Oh, in most adventures there is, I think, maybe it's one egregious example of that. But generally, he doesn't care. This is good, by the way. Second edition designers who there's no set piece cutscene you need to watch, and it's just assumed players are there to go and accomplish stuff and take dangers and win or lose. It's a very good basis for design, isn't it? There's a bedroom in the wardrobe. There's the partially eaten remains of a peasant girl with 4 CP plus what she thought was a magical stick. It wasn't. Yeah, there are also 2 lemures who, with 14 and 12 HD each, 1 attack at 1d3. They're tough. Their AC is 7. They're actually, that's not a bad 5 PC first encounter, because they shouldn't take out the front rank fighters too quickly. Their Thaco's 19, they're doing 1d3 damage. But they're not going to be taken out in one round unless a lot of stuff happens. They can last a couple of rounds. They're not, and they're also otherworldly. They give the sense that something weird has happened. There's a library with Finut's spellbook in it, which has, Audible Glamour, Change Self, Detect Magic, Erase, Grease and Shield, and second level Alter Self, Flaming Sphere, Pyrotechnics and Whispering Wind. It's great. The idea that you have a spellbook that you can immediately give to a wizard character if they search around stuff. If they look around all this kind of torn up, smashed up stuff in the library. And then there's the lab, which is that room. So it's not very clear, is it? So this room here, through which you get to that place. There's a secret door at the back of it, as you could see. And in the lab, there is not much. There's some notes which talk about Finit, or whoever it is, attempting to travel to other planes. And then there's a secret lab, and the trap here is that there's a very dusty magic circle. You can see it. The players can see it. There's stuff on tables, I think, at the edge. Alchemical equipment and potion bottles lit to the table closest to the centre of the room. There's stuff that players might want. There is a clear warning, the fair shout that you can see there's magic circle, but it's partially covered, and your players step onto it and they go to Bartor. There's an interesting question: what happens if your players don't step on it and go to Bartor? And the answer here is that it is a good idea, probably. One, there's a good bet they do, but you might. And because it's this kind of explosive planar effect, if one player steps on, the rest get sucked in. And that's fair. That's not fudging the game. That's just how this portal works. But if your players don't, we'll just have another adventure for them. Know that players might be cautious and decide they've got some really good stuff from this, and they're going to go back to town and go and do something else. They are then in Avernus, and they're at the... they are up on a outcropping, which is up here, and there's a Spinnigan. Spinnigans have MR, but they don't have weapon resistance. They've got 3 attacks, which is D4, D4, and weapon, and they've got Thaco 17. He's got HP 20. Only HD 3 plus 3. So this is more challenging than the lemurs because of the 3 attacks, better Thaco. The HP is less net than the lemurs. And AC4 is better. So it's a challenge up, but it's not a crazy thing, it's not like this is an impossible battle to win for, again, 5 first levels. This is quite clever design, the idea that you're saying you're immediately going to fight planars, you're immediately going to fight tougher planars, but they are within your range because you're in kind of minor places. One was just some lemurs managed to come through the portal somehow. I think he might have summoned them in the exchange when he presumably gets to Bartor and is eaten up or whatever. You can either kill Halitsu, or Halitsu wants to go and warn his superiors there's an invasion force. You need to stop him, otherwise things get worse for you. He will. Oh, he does have. To be fair, he does have a special attack as well. But yes, he can be. He can be interrogated. He will tell you stuff, and that is. not a, you know, that's good. The idea that it is, as soon as combat, at least some form of threatening combat, you have to stop them flying away. But it's not that the game consists of just you killing stuff. Immediately teaches a good lesson. You learn more via interrogation. You can then go off to the, well, I guess the relative east over here in the mountains. Up here, my players, by the way, this is one criticism here. It's not a major one. It's sort of a cost of the Anthology format that if you're buying an Anthology, you should know. This is the whole plane layer of Avernus. My players wanted to go into the nostrils because they saw them, and when they went up here, they wanted to go up to the blood lake at the top in the hand, which I don't know if it's in here or not, but I decided was a plane of water. What's that? Is it water? Is it? Because obviously you can't have that. What is it? There are direct portals, but they're a particular kind. I forget. But yeah, and then it's getting kind of corrupted when it gets there, and kind of giving them the chance to go and find some stuff. And that was fine. I put some lava in one, and I put some weird Avernal salt crystals in the other, which they could sell. So, you know, treasure for, because I'm running treasure for XP, so it gives them extra opportunities for that. And I think there was an imp in the nostrils as well, guarding the larvae. So I had to make it up. There's a whole map with a bunch of locations on it, and including the great city of, is the city called Bell as well as the Lord? You know, I guess you can't really expect them to detail that at all. But it'd be nice to have one or two more bits, you know, locations than we do, especially given when you're talking about a problem where there's always overwriting, you know, there's words to be saved. But yeah, then you have to go and negotiate with a planar witch, a half-elf witch, who will negotiate with you and tell you basically to go to the Pillar of Skulls, which I think is in Planescape Torment, isn't it? The Pillar of Skulls is living heads, sages who thought they knew better. And here, this is a really interesting social encounter that you know, there's different heads want different things, and you can negotiate, and you can feed it, or you can do various things basically to get the information. You can get different. I think it's you know, they argue, some lie, some don't. There's a riverbed. You might need to cross back over the river. Presumably there are giant bloodworms. Bell's Huge Keep gets like 2 paragraphs, which is pretty clear. You know, it's impossible to get into. They're not going to get into there. And then there's a question of there's an army going off to presumably the Blood War on the road, which is then an obstacle. The mechanics for this are very vague. This is not atypical of this book or indeed the whole era. You need to get to here, down at that's the southern end of the map, with a brick from the road. The army is on the road at various points. You get to the road, you get to the gateway, and there is a red Abishai there. So red Abishai immune to non-magical, well, less than +1. Lots of powers, but basically he wants to negotiate with you. So there's already this thing where this is very different from either pure killing, nor is it kind of, though it's linear because you have to get somewhere to escape Bartor, and this is the advice you've got. There's various things you need to do in that, and it gives you the low-level experience by you having to hide a lot. There's things overhead you need to hide from, and there's an army you need to avoid because you can't go into the city because you're too weak, and that's good. Basically, I guess if it's, you know, I guess what happens if you ran it for 18th level characters, they probably could run enough magic to sneak in. You of course go to Sigil, and I had them meet Stronghoof in Sigil. Chapter 2, the mazes. You are being sent. There's some boring faction stuff. Faction stuff is really marginal. I think actually it's. I think you should not trust the general advice. Not that everyone gives this. I just mean like the advice you'll commonly see when people are saying this is usually in kind of like geek website articles about what they liked about Planescape is just all the stuff in Sigil. I talked about this in the last review in the cage, and it's just all about the factions. Even the Planescape books say just introduce a couple of the factions at a time at least, because it's just too much. But also that unless you get stuff like Faction War, unless you get Faces of Sigil, you've got to make up a lot of stuff, and you've got to make up a lot of activities, and they're better used a lot of the time as background flavour while you get a Bill and Ted thing going around the plains, I think. But yeah, so the factions send you off to get a magic sword from a imprisoned factor, imprisoned in the mazes, Timlin, who is mentioned in the cage, amongst other places, of the expansionists. And yeah, there's some questions about mapping. He gives you 3 options: specific details, general description, and aimless wandering. There's an interesting point here that it kind of gives a node crawling randomness to aimless wandering. The general descript versus specific, it does give upsides and downsides. The downside of each being, the specific being, it's I think it does say it's yeah, it takes a lot of game time, and careful players will still get confused, particularly because of magical hallways. The general description players, on the other hand, might lose their way because they've only made a general way and they don't really know where to get back, which means you then as the DM fudge it for them. So yeah, that's good advice. It's giving you procedures. That's relatively rare. It gives you the stats for Timlin. It then gives you a couple of things. It gives you a map, which is actually a dungeon map. Look, it's allowed to be slightly gimmickly looping because it's a weird maze that the lady has set up. It gives you a timeline for Timlin's activities for over 24 hours, and it gives you a timeline of events over 2 days with the other 3 factions. I think it's the Harmonium, the Fated, and the Mercy Killers who come into the maze looking for the same item. This is great. This is comfortably one of the best put together there, just on that basis, in terms of running an adventure which is kind of heisty, kind of searchy. The factional encounters are okay. One of them will just attack you. One of them will try to trick you, I think. Is that the way around it goes? It's at the Harmonium. Yeah, just want the stuff and are arrogant. And the Mercy Killers will try to negotiate and yeah, and then take off Lightbringer. Is that how it does it? I think they're the ones who eventually find it. Maybe is it? Yeah, I think it's them who. Oh no, it's the Fated who negotiate with you. The Mercy Killers who just try to kind of follow you around and find out what you find out. There's then only 5 locations on the map. This is the weakness of this one. This is the problem of it being too short. I mean, they're interesting. The stuff that you see is kind of intriguingly Planescapey, and this is a good flavour of Planescape thing, much like I think Bar Taurenbach is. But it's pretty undetailed. The interesting stuff here is the interactions with the 3 faction groups and Timlin and the timeline. So much praise for that. Chapter 3, Love Letter, is a succubus and a Cornugon are in love, and this is levelable, and it gives you different challenges depending on how and the higher level you are, the longer this love affair is presumed to be going on. Basically, he comes and gives you the job. He's in disguise. He comes and gives you the job in Sigil. You then you're then, I think, weirdly, about 2 Barbazu and an Arinyas come through the portal with you to try to interrogate you, because there's some suspicions that either the Cornugon and or the succubus has gone stag, one way or the other. Both sides believe these kind of senior operatives might be compromised, but they're not sure. Because they're enemies, they're Romeo and Juliet. You then get a map of a section of Layer 1 of the Abyss. It's interesting here, it's similar, you can see there, that is the whole Abyss. That is a partial map, obviously, of the top layer of the Abyss. And I guess the Abyss is more complicated in some ways, but again, you can imagine the backside of this being that, as a nice handout to use in future. And there's a couple, I think you get part of the Beastlands, you get part of Carceria, of Colothis. So you've got a couple of the candidates for the same thing. This is leveled, so it'll tell you what happens in each area depending on your level as a potential challenge. Some of it's vague, high-level PCs. Tanari from the lower abyssal levels below the craters which take you, which take you to different layers of the abyss. It's like here. they might pop out and attack you. It's not very specific, is it? It'd be nice to have a bit more info than that, especially when you're fairly regularly dealing with, you know, like half a column of you can see that slightly miscoloured orangey text, half a column of read aloud. But yeah, there's a crossroads with a skull who lies to you but also wants your company. That's very flavourful, that's very Planescape. You've got the craters, you could end up going to other parts of the abyss. There's a wharf with a, you know, you can either cross round this way, which is E, or you can go D and F. So you've got two different challenges, E or D and F. The lake is acid, and there's a modified Elasmosaurus, and that's for mid and high level PCs, to be fair. And there is a whirlpool, which isn't super hard to get away from if you think about it, but it kind of is just don't be stupid. If you go around the other side, you get 4 eye wings, 8 eye wings, or 16 eye wings. So you get just a fight. So it's less an environmental challenge like the lake is with the caustic lake itself and the maelstrom, and more a combat thing. Then you get most of the remainder of it is there is a simple map of 3-level map of the succubus's tower, and basically you just have to get up there and give it the letter to her and not fall out with her and not get caught stealing her stuff, frankly. There is the high level option is that there is a Balor and 2 Molodeus kind of got demon dogs there to fight you because they're suspicious you're doing something, you know, you're here to, well, the succubus is a traitor and stuff. The Chiron's Tower, the succubus's tower, is kind of fun. I appreciate the mapping. There is like a little, you see a depiction of the tower too. There's some really good flavoursome stuff. Her different kind of, you know, there's the senses of pain and the senses of pleasure rooms. There is a library with some spell books about conjuring and controlling succubi. So, you know, summoning magic. That players might like that stuff. There is a cloak. There's a random cloak of the bat in the cloakroom. There's some prisony stuff that could trap you. There's a room full of good treasure. There's a room full of bad treasure, like fake treasure. 500 PP, dagger +3, 5 gems worth, 500 GP each, and then her sleeping chamber. But at the same time, there's not very much to do in it. So you've got a fairly long key for something which is, there's a couple of traps, and there's the risk of upsetting her. And then you give it to her, and then either you're friends with them afterwards or not. And there might be vengeance attempts. There's a few times you get stuff in the epilogue section, which is like the layout, by the way, of the main part of the story with map or whatever, like the setup, summary setup, main part of the adventure, climax, epilogue, isn't bad. It exaggerates stuff, and it sometimes sets stuff up as more linear than they need to be, but it works. I think as a job, this is great. This is very Planescape. The actual adventure is simple, but isn't dumb. It feels, despite being several pages long, it still feels like an adventure outline rather than a short adventure. I think that's a GURPS thing I'm getting on, you know, like adventure outline seed. I think there's still some sense that maybe it's just a long outline, and that's true with a couple of these. I think Bartorum Back just about gets away with it because it has the detailed wizard's mound, and the mazes gets away with it despite having a non-detailed dungeon map comparatively because of the timeline stuff, which is very clever. Whereas I think Love Letter, which is a good adventure, it still feels slightly, you know, like, oh yeah, just there's some decent stuff on the Abyss map. You might want to add some stuff. It's not very big. Oh, and there's this tower. There's not very much to do in it. But, you know, you can add a couple of things and it becomes very good from being merely good. Bloodstorm is higher level. It's 9th or higher. The first 3 are all any or low. I think the first is like lowish. Mazes is any. And Love Letter is any with his. Bloodstorm is high-ish, 9th or higher. You could actually end up being actually high level on this. It's a weird one that you get. You go to a prime city and then you get hired basically by a by a Batasian, by a Tanari, basically by a Balor and a Pit Fiend, who have managed to like desecrate and take over this graveyard and this church in this prime city. And they're setting up a meeting, and they want you to be bodyguards. So there's a bunch of stuff that's actually quite good here. I don't actually think the setup is that good. Like, it's kind of cute. It's fun, the idea that you've got this high negotiation situation. They want to do stuff for you. They might get annoyed if you reject them. You can double cross them. Stuff that's actually quite strong. McComb is good at leaving multiple endings possible in virtually all of these adventures. Nearly all of them, not all, but nearly all. Greatly to be praised, I think. Here, the actual thing is, you're like, I guess 9th or 10th level, yeah, you could go to prime cities. That doesn't not make sense. But it's a kind of very enclosed force situation. And the stuff that's there isn't super interesting. Basically, eventually it goes belly up and you have to side with one side or the other or neither. And who you side with wins. They'll each summon wights or ghasts respectively to come and help them, depending on what they are. And you might need to save some guards, city guards who turn up. It's not super weak because there's some very good ideas in the setup, and in the idea that you might have like blood war negotiations, though it's not really clear what they'll be negotiating given, they're Balors and Pit Fiends, but they're not dukes, are they? They're not powers or demi-powers. Chapter 5, Hard Time. You can see rope bridges between mountains on Colossus and Carceri. This is good with the same caveats as others. It is low levels preferred. The idea here, I think, being so that you don't get like 9th level characters start thinking they should do stuff that maybe they shouldn't. You need to go and there's a misplaced soul, neutral dwarf sage who's ended up on Carceri. You have to go and get them. There's a boring setup. You're kind of blackmailed apparently into going into it eventually by the curator of the Dwarven Mountain Archives. Also not super exciting, but all of them, so many of these, this is a good example. Love Letter. Some of them, like Love Letter, are set up actively as just jobs that might turn up. Of course, because it can't just be on a job board or a rumour, it has to be that a guy approaches you in a bar. But this one, again, this could just be a rumour that, some factions are looking for a Dwarven Sage or whatever. You've got a few different locations to go through. There are various challenges a couple of times over like rope bridges and oddities. This is super flavourful. Each of the areas you go to is interesting. The town of Gala or Jailer, they're all a bit weird. They are actually petitioners here. And you can buy stuff there. You go across the rope bridge, then you're basically extorted, and if you refuse to pay, you're going to have to escape over the bridge before you fall into an endless chasm. So real risks again, though this is soft because you get like 4 rounds before. Is it 4 or 8 rounds? I think 4 rounds. 8 rounds. 8 rounds for her to slice it free. So you've got plenty of time to run and do other stuff. It depends, you might then still have to make some saves, dexterity checks, and catch yourself as you go. You get pointed to falling damage for partial falls. Then you can meet a hill giant. There is a map. Again, this would have been a great great candidate for the backside of this. In fact, this probably better than the Abyss. You got like a big mountain range area. It's a linear map, as in there are forks, and the forks, I guess you can negotiate back and forth. There's no scale on it, so it doesn't really matter. You can make it up as the DM. That's a weakness, I guess. But there are a few places to go. It's not very different in that sense to a casual reading of the map in Sojkanth, which you're like, well, all these locations are just off the main road. They're kind of not. It is a better map than this, but you could see a lesson being mislearned. There's a neutral hill giant who wants to go and find fellow hill giants because this is their plane of rest, and they are, beloved of Groland Tor. So why not, help her? And she'll help you. She'll go wherever you want with her. She doesn't want to die for you, but she will help you. She will anchor you when you're up on mountain passes and stuff to stop you falling over. There are rules for potentially falling on cliffs. So yeah, you could be friends with her. That's great. That's, you know, it's a bit of a kobold ally thing, isn't it? There's a Yugoloth you can make friends with over here on a different fork. So you meet the hill giant, you know, there. You then, yeah, not enough zoom on this, is there? The hill giant there. You can go up there for this Yugoloth in a cave, who will, if you feed her I think it is, she'll give you information about where you might find people. The hill giant steading. If you try to go in yourself, there's a bunch of hill giants. There is a profoundly lame thing about if you manage to by a miracle kill a number of hill giants, Grunantor himself descends. You're like, oh, okay. Don't do stuff. Don't go to the plains and do stuff. That's bad. It's a bad line. Maybe give conditions on it. Maybe give particular things. But just generally going in and fighting seems lame. But yeah, she, if you take Tanaka there, she will go in and she wants to stay there, and she's very grateful to see, you know, to say goodbye and go to where she wants. So that's nice that you've helped her. It might be nice to get some payoff on that. You know, that's essentially you've taken her to where she wants to go. She helps you in some way after, you know, as a result. She doesn't have any magic weapons, I think, or anything though. So there's a village of Strafling, so a village of lost petitioners who are hiding out, being guarded by a rope bridge and cliff. You can buy some stuff there. Essentially they want to escape, so they could want to come to the place where eventually you will escape. All of this is pointing you to a Titan's temple, Cryos' temple. There's then that map you saw there, a not incredibly exciting but quite adequate temple map, pretty classic. With, to be fair, I mean, it's got 24 rooms or something. It's not nothing. This is a moderately detailed one, and there is some good treasure hidden in a few places. All the weapons you could want in an armory. There is, yeah, the treasury has loads of stuff in it, as you'd expect. The watchers, the human watchers, do have gold and short swords, and because you're relatively low level, if you end up in a fight with them, then you would be able to get some moderately useful stuff at your level, you know, if you're third level or something. Yeah, there's some other, there's some priests who are priests but don't get spells because he's not actually a power, Cryos, which seems less ideal, and they don't have much treasure on them, which is perhaps disappointing. You can get loads of Retsina and Uzo from it if you like. And then there's a prison where you can rescue this dwarf. There's art rooms where you could, if you can move them, they're worth 20,000 each. There's not a number. There's a few instances of this where you get treasure listed without a number of what it is. Like there's 4 of them or something. Eventually you can either get to, it's in the storeroom, and he knows it, this dwarf knows it's in the storeroom. Yeah, if you can rescue him first and you don't get trapped, because it's a one-way door into the prison. You need to open it, not walk in, as it were. Yeah, which is confusing. I can kind of imagine running it. But yeah, Zeracook can just get you out. But if you're captured, you might end up being given a riddle by the Titan, who I assume is this guy. The Titan is statted as a 390 HP 30 HD chaotic evil Titan. You can't defeat him on this play on his own realm. So his special defense is interesting because he only needs +1 better. He has spells and he has special attacks in his lair, and he's immune to missile damage, and he has a good MR. But he's not at all. Titans are very powerful. They've got massive hit points and they have MR. But beyond that, it's more marginal because missile attacks. So I mean that does take out one group of things. It doesn't take out all spells. MR might, but some range spells are not missile attacks. It doesn't take out. I mean, his AC is high, but if this was a high level party, you can imagine a fight up. That is a isn't that is reused from Eternal Boundary. There's the Plane of Fire. As I say, that's not at all appropriate here, so that's bad use. But it's a good one. I think, you know, you might make an alliance with this Arcanoloth, who might give you some partial help, or may, if she ever escapes to Sigil, kind of help you for a bit, but will eventually revert to type and be evil. That's interesting. You could become friends with people at the Dwarven Mountain. Crius, especially if you've stolen his stuff, will be very angry. So yeah, that's a good one. That is, so I think that's 4 out of 5 to this point, which are, I think, genuinely pretty strong and Planescapey. And Bloodstorm is interesting, it just doesn't quite work. The remaining 4 are more mixed, I think. There are moments of genuinely really good stuff. One of them is, I think some people really like. I think it has some weaknesses, but yeah. Epona's Daughter. This is basically all on the prime. A Celtic lord has managed to kidnap and nick Epona using a magic item. It's a magic world. His 15th level wizard buddy has helped him do this. And he wants to help his people, and he's big into, because him and the wizard are both technically lawful good. Here we run into, because of stuff, and it's not the only time in this book, one of the many instances where the whole, alignment doesn't matter much on the planes thing becomes an excuse essentially, if you can't understand, in the context of the planes being embodiments of philosophies, alignment matters less on its own than in philosophy. I'm not sure if you then say that means I don't get alignments and people are going to act really weird based on their alignment, and that happens regularly through this. Then there is a problem. You know, these guys are technically greater good types, but given how ruthless they're willing to be, you suspect they're probably more lawful neutral in typical terms than lawful good. But yeah, I would say the neutral hill giant is a good example of, like, look, they're neutral, but they're still a petitioner on a plane that is not true neutral. It's neutral evil. Is it neutral to chaotic evil? It's on that mix, because her god is here. So, you know, great. Here you've got these slightly ruthless greater good types who want to strengthen their kingdom with magical horses. They kidnap and nick Epona so they can use the magic horse. It's not clear, given it's not entirely clear that I should say, in terms of detail, it's the art, I do think that's a really nice piece, that landscape, Celtic landscape. It's not clear that why they don't know the nick Epona are sentient, but because they don't seem to. But there we are. You can probably come up with a reason for that. And nick Epona comes and hires you and says, you know, that her people will help you if you rescue her sister, and then you will take you through to, well, Loch Nuin, which is part of a small map on the world or continent or kingdom or whatever of Kellenon. This is a prime world. You know, it's a nice idea. You could use your, which HR is about HR Celts. You could do something with this. This again is just an underdeveloped, and this is one of the more painfully underdeveloped examples of this. There is a similar thing to the Abyss map where there's one of 2 challenges, and that you can choose a challenge at one point, and that's actually good. But there's basically at location A, this is the worst of these for this. Location A, there's nothing to do. You just leave it. Location B, there's a shepherdess who can help you and advise you and take you to her village, so that's not necessarily bad. It's negotiation 1, but that's the only thing between the whole of A and B. The bog has literally like 12 trolls in it, or something insane. Yeah, roving packs of up to 12. So there's an unnumbered number of trolls, which seems like I don't know why, I guess everyone goes all the long way around to get away. There are lights in the forest. The lights in the forest are not, in fact, will-o'-the-wisps, which your players will think, but instead they are forest gnomes who, if you talk to them, will they won't accompany you, but they will offer assistance for rescuing the nick Epona, who is they would count as one of their people. You know, as a fae. There's a weird thing where a big thing hinges, not big thing, but a big point is that McDougal and Kipan, his wizard, think there is such a thing as the Fae, and that the Seelie Court has made arrangements with them. This is based on an elf bard lying to them. Of course, there's no such thing as the Seelie Court, except there is. This might be an issue that this is written before Eladrin and Arborea and the Seelie and the Unseelie are written. But it is a bit strange that it jars, you know, it means there's no realm of Fae and Fairy, and I think classically there should be, really, especially in something like Planescape. So there's that, you know, but it's relevant. The idea is they've developed this not true religion about the Fae, which can certainly be used. There is the keep, there is the village, which essentially you'll get reported on if you go to, and they can't do much for you. So there's not, the cutters can find little value in this town. So there's that kind of means there's 2 and a bit locations, especially because the shepherdess will only she'll advise you about the challenges ahead, and then she'll take you to her town if you want her to. But you know, it's 2.5 locations which are low value. Really, you're only talking about this stuff where you've got a challenge to choose, you know, whether you go through the swamp or into the forest, and then you've got the castle. Those are the only real things going on in this one. The castle is, again, okay, it's a little bit like the Succubus's Tower, that there's hints of an interesting setting. And it's defensible, and there are rules about, you know, if you need to storm it or break in somewhat. And there's not an order of battle for the guard type, you know, with timetables and stuff, but yeah, there we are. But yes, it's promising without necessarily having very much detail on stuff. And it'll give random bits of detail, like there's 123 gold total in the barracks, which this is a higher level one. This is graded 9th to 11th because of the bosses. You know, but it's an odd one that you get bits of detail like that, which is fine. It says it's not going to be very valuable, but there it is. But other stuff, you don't get very much info. You then get information about the butler, the cook, and the head maid and their quarters. So there's a potential social adventure here. I think it should be presumed there is a social adventure here. There is a vault, which, to be fair, has a lot of good stuff in it. 10,000 copper, 10,000 silver, 5,000 gold, 1,000 platinum, 100 gems of various values. Elven paintings, not numbered, but worth 100 gold pieces elsewhere, or 10,000 here. Elven harp, 500 elsewhere. Gnome crafted crystal goblets, 1,000 elsewhere. There is a library, which the books aren't very valuable. There's the King's Quarters, which is well furnished. I guess there's a question about there's no values for stealing the furnishing, which there should be. And then there's the basement, which has some stuff that kind of hints that they're trying to experiment on weird creatures, demi-humans, etc. There is the wizard's bedroom, which does include a bunch of useful magic, including a staff of the Magi, which I guess he is usually carrying, to be fair. Oh no, he's not usually carrying. He obviously stores it because it's not on his character sheet. You can then free the Nicopona. There's a few other things, including potentially valuable wine. There's no one in the prisons, I don't think, which is... Oh no, there are people in the prisons, but they're not interesting. That's a mistake. Have interesting people in the prisons. And then there's the 15th level King McDougal and 14th level Wizard, who can't be trained anymore, so he could be allied with, and you could say, come and train. Now, here's the most interesting thing, that there are 2 options. The actual most interesting thing here is, and this will only take a couple of pages, and this highlights the problem here, that this is a long adventure, one of the longer ones, I think, for comparatively not loads of payoff. 16 pages, it's about the longest adventure. Actually, you can either negotiate with McDougal and make different offers to pay him for this, what he thinks is a gift from the Seelie, or you can fight them. And if you fight them, they're going to chase you out if they survive. You are then given a Deus Ex, which is bad. There's 2 Deus Exes in this, basically. This is where the Nicopona will turn up and charge them. But the fact you can negotiate or fight is good. And the fact it does then say in the epilogue, oh, they'll feel they're cheated. But actually, I think, why not make friends with them? Why not make Kellenon not just... McComb is trying to set up continuity. But I think it's more interesting to be open-ended. What if you give them something better than a Nicopona? Well, they're going to be your friends, aren't they? 7 recruiters. This is, I think, well liked. Basically, the Plague Mort is about, which is the Abyss gate town on the Outlands. You know, it kind of links the 2. It's about to fall into the Abyss, and the Archlector, the leader of it, plus some Tenari he's allied with, are working to make this happen. And there's some interesting stuff. There's a lot of flavour on this. It's very flavoursome in terms of how weird and grim stuff is and what happens and how people act, and the corruption. There's some decent art. There's little character sheets of character details of the Tenari, which are okay. They're useful if you make this be a bigger adventure than you are presented with here. There's a few different bits and pieces and interesting things. You're pointed to the Planescape campaign setting for info on Plague Mort. There's loads of temples here, which is interesting, and there's the possibility, because not everyone in Plague Mort is chaotic evil, there's also a possibility some of the temples are even attended by sincere people as well as those who are hedging. But it's a bit vague, and then there is a section on the slums and the portal you need to a portal that takes you into the slums. That's where you arrive. Then you're given stuff, some potential random encounters. You see the bullet points there. No systems presented on how they happen, but there's some random encounters. Things happen, things get worse and worse as the provocations happen that cause ultimate chaos, and leading to the announcement that the Archlector is dead. This was the Archlector's plan. His Atnari allies have just made it reality and killed him. You know, who's going to fake it? They've made it happen. And then you're told, oh, you need to kind of stop this happening if you want to escape, because as it's dragged into planar limbo, not the plane limbo, but planar limbo, you can't escape anymore. It then just says you do charisma checks and go around telling people to calm down. It just collapses at the end. It doesn't, you know, it's a bit vague but interesting, and then it collapses. And then it says the Archlector comes back. That's kind of fun. And there is an idea of the unity of rings, meaning that even if you improve stuff, it will revert to the mean eventually. I think having more personalities, more NPCs you can engage with who might be interesting, both chaotic evil but chaotic neutral, true neutral people who are just stuck there, depressed or whatever. I don't know, some annoying real Marnie. They don't exist at the point of this book, I don't think. But you get the idea. The hunt, the hunter's become the hunted. You kill a magic heart on the Outlands. You go to the Beastlands. You're then chased by a wild hunt kind of thing, led by a slightly mad warden with loads of dogs and loads of hawks. There is a map of this layer of the Beastlands. I forget which one it is. I think it's the top one. It's this is actually probably itself specifically the vaguest of them. I guess technically the Arrival is generic, but then there's Scrubland with what challenges for stumbling, rules crossing the river, rules for low hill, rules for going into the forest. There's not really many rules for the forest that you could go to. The final bit of Scrubland before because the idiot you're helping Hunt, who's now dragged you because of the magic of this magic white heart into it's reverse Narnia, isn't it? Like, he actually isn't completely stupid, and he's like, I think we should go to the Circle of Stones, we can see. So there's an interesting thing there. There's a chase. There's technically a rule for the ocean there. There's a map, there's a bunch of locations, but none of them are really detailed enough. And the thing that is happening, the hunt, here's an interesting thing. McComb gives a bunch of mechanics. He has correct mechanic references. He says this is going to be relevant. These are challenges to do with slowing time. There's not actually a mechanic for the distances, I don't think, or for the kind of the basic rule of what you're doing once you get there. The hunted, so it's like, and it gives options for what happens if you try to run away in different ways. But it's not very clear to me what the distance is and how quickly it gets caught up. It's abstract, but it doesn't give an abstract system. This is a failure. I think a point I saw on a Goodreads review, actually, of all things, was that really this is, the idea itself is pretty generic. Hunter becomes the hunted. There are other adventures that might do something similar where you're running away. Here it's not amazingly executed, but it could be a lot more interesting if instead you had that be the prologue, really, and then you have to do a quest on the Beastlands to win forgiveness. It is then hinted you should do that in the epilogue. That is much more interesting. Final one is River Oceanus. You're travelling from the Beastlands. You portage a barge down waterfall into Arborea. You don't do anything in Arborea or the Beastlands. It's not really a planar adventure. There is then, it turns out that the people at the portage inn are dead, and you go investigating, and you find behind the waterfalls basically a cave system. Some Slardy are coming through and they're invading. The Slardy are quite flavourful. That bit of it, the Slardy acting like weird Slardy who do single combat, and it's all about survival of the fittest, and like they fight each other to go up in power, but it's a weird kind of way they gain power, and they have like symbols like Rimmer from Red Dwarf on their heads. That's quite good. The actual thing is not a particularly interesting dungeon. There's one trap which is kind of okay. You can cast Speak with Dead on a Spectre in one room where the Slard won't go. That's good. Doesn't matter though. Nothing happens there. That's a failure. And there's some decent treasure in the Grey Slard's base. And that's actually an interesting setup, that when the Grey Slard who's leading this invasion, who wants to prove himself, he wants to do an invasion, get stuff, and then fight and defeat a Death Slard is the gimmick. You can get his stuff off out of his chamber and then use it to fight him. It, includes a Helm of Telepathy, a Staff of Wizardry, some potions. And then there's a fight with him, and he has a Dancing Vorpalax. That's good loot, +3. It's not a very interesting encounter. But then there's some vague stuff about, while there's been some murders, what's happening. But it's very rushed. Then there's the epilogue on magic items. So of those, I would say that you've got a very good Bartor adventure, Prime and Bartor setup adventure for campaign. Good mazes, very good. Love Letter, very good. So that's technically on the Abyss. They all have some flaws. I think Barter on Back and the mazes and Hard Time are the best accomplished. But Love Letter is also very good. Bloodstorm's fine. Epona's Daughter is promising and not actually very interesting in the final event. Recruiter, well, it could be a very different adventure that'd be better. Recruiters is interesting and is very Planescape-y, but doesn't actually provide you systems for the falling into the Abyss or dragging it back out of the Abyss stuff, which is the entire adventure, and therefore I think it has a good idea you're going to need to save. The Hunt takes you to an interesting place that then isn't very interesting. And People Under the Falls is a fun, classic dungeon crawl, really. By that, I mean, it's not a classic dungeon crawl. A classic hack and slash style dungeon crawl where you just go and fight some stuff. You have a fun session fighting weird stuff. That's it. There's nothing else to it. It's not deep. It's not clever. It's very forgettable. So of those, that would make, I think, for me, 1, 2, 3, 4 good, a couple okay, a couple weak. It's good. If you're going to run Planescape, you're going to get ideas from it. It's got some stuff you can run straight from the book. So I do recommend Well of Worlds. If you've used it at all, tell me what you think in the comments. Tell me what you think of the other anthologies. I will see you next time.